If you've ever tried to set up Apache Kafka, you know the feeling. It's like staring at a puzzle with 1,000 pieces, and none of them seem to fit. It's an incredibly powerful tool, for sure, but man, it can be confusing. Well, today we're going to sort through that mess, put all the pieces together, and finally make some sense of it all.
And look, if you're confused, you are definitely not alone. This whole explainer was actually sparked by a developer on Reddit asking this exact question. They were just trying to figure out, what's the deal with all these different versions and which one am I supposed to use? It's a huge pain point for so many of us, so let's solve this puzzle together once and for all.
So here's our game plan. First, we're going to break down the different flavors of Kafka. Then we'll get into the weeds on how you actually deploy it on Kubernetes, Helm versus operators. After that, we are going to dive into a massive, unfolding crisis with Bitnami images. I'll show you exactly how to fix it, and we'll wrap up with the really big lesson this whole thing teaches us. Okay, first things first. Let's clear up all the confusion around the names you see floating around. They aren't really different versions of Kafka, it's more like they're different players in a much larger ecosystem. Everything, and I mean everything, starts right here with Apache Kafka. This is the OG, the open source project, the core engine that makes it all work. It is unbelievably powerful and flexible, but it's also kind of the some assembly required version. You really need to know what you're doing to run this thing in production without pulling your hair out. So then you've got Confluent. The easiest way to think about them is as the main company that builds on top of that core Apache Kafka. They package it all up into a super slick, enterprise-ready platform. They add all the bells and whistles, security features, nice UIs, and crucially, enterprise support. So it's an extension of Kafka, not a totally different thing. And that brings us to Bitnami. Now, this is a really important distinction. Bitnami is not another type of Kafka. They're a packager. Their entire job is to take awesome open source software, like Apache Kafka, and make it ridiculously easy to deploy by giving you pre-configured Docker images and Helm charts. They're all about simplifying that initial setup.
This table just lays it all out so perfectly. You can see the trade-offs right away. Confluent is fantastic for big, serious enterprise stuff, but it's going to cost you. AWS MSK is a no-brainer if you're already living in the AWS world. Bitnami's version has always been that sweet spot for smaller projects where you want to keep costs down. And then there's the pure open source route, which gives you all the control in the world, but you're on the hook for all the maintenance.
All right, so now that we know what we're dealing with, let's talk about how we actually get it running. When you're in the Kubernetes world, your choice for deploying and managing something as complex as Kafka really boils down to two main schools of thought: using a Helm chart or using an operator. Let me break this down with an analogy because it makes it so much clearer. A Helm chart is like a blueprint. It's amazing for what we call day one operations, getting everything installed and configured correctly in the first place. But an operator, something like Strimzi, that's more like an autopilot. It's a full-blown application that lives inside your cluster and handles not just day one, but all the messy day two stuff too. Things like handling updates, recovering from failures, rebalancing partitions. It's constantly watching over your Kafka cluster for you.
And hey, you don't have to take my word for it. A maintainer on the Strimzi project, which is one of the most popular Kafka operators out there, put it perfectly. The operator literally operates the cluster for you. For something as stateful and complex as Kafka, having that level of automation is an absolute game changer. It can save you from a world of late-night manual headaches.
Okay, so we've got the players, we've got the tools, everything seems to make sense, but right now the whole ecosystem is getting rocked by a major plot twist, and it's all centered around Bitnami, the packager we were just talking about. Here's the timeline you need to burn into your brain. Before August 28, 2025, life was good. Bitnami gave us all these awesome, free, stable, and updated images on Docker Hub. But after that date, almost everything is getting shoved into a new Bitnami legacy repository. And the crucial part? It will get 0 updates, no bug fixes, and this is the scary part, no security patches.
So what does this actually mean for you day to day? Well, it means that if your deployment files are pointing to the old Bitnami/location with a specific version, after that deadline, they're just going to break. Your CI/CD pipelines will start failing, your Kubernetes pods won't be able to restart, you're going to start seeing that dreaded image pullback off error everywhere.
So why in the world is this happening? Well, it all comes down to a business model shift by Broadcom, Bitnami's parent company. If you want the new, shiny, secure, and maintained images, you're going to have to pay up. And we're talking about an annual subscription that starts at around $50,000.
Okay, I know that sounds pretty bad, and it is a serious problem, but it is not a hopeless situation. So let's walk through the exact steps you can take right now to avoid a complete disaster.
All right, first up is the immediate short-term fix. Think of this as a Band-Aid, but it's one you absolutely have to apply. Step 1, search your entire codebase, Helm charts, Docker files, Kubernetes manifests, everything, for any reference to a Bitnami/image. Step 2, change that repository name from Bitnami to Bitnami Legacy. And step 3, and this is critical, test this change immediately. Get it into a staging environment and make sure it works. You have to do this before the deadline hits.
But let me be crystal clear about this. This is not a long-term solution. By pointing to that legacy repo, you are knowingly accepting a future with zero security updates and zero bug fixes. On top of that, we have no idea how long that legacy repo will even exist. It could literally vanish without warning one day, and you're right back to having broken systems.
So the real solution, the strategic move, is to think bigger. Option 1. Migrate away from the Helm chart to a proper Kubernetes operator like Strimzi. This gives you that robust, automated management we talked about without any dependency on Bitnami's packaging. Option 2, and frankly often the best choice, just switch to a fully managed service like Confluent Cloud or Amazon MSK. Let them handle the operational nightmare so you can focus on building your actual applications instead of putting out infrastructure fires.
You know, this whole Bitnami crisis, it's not just about Kafka or one company. It's a really powerful and kind of painful lesson about the fragility of the entire modern software supply chain and how we build things today.
This quote from a blog post really just hits the nail on the head. For anyone who remembers, the LeftPad incident was when one developer unpublished a tiny 11-line piece of code from NPM, and it broke thousands of major projects across the internet. This is that, but potentially way bigger, because Bitnami's images are a fundamental building block for a huge chunk of the Kubernetes world. So what's the big takeaway from all this chaos? Well, first, you have to understand the business model behind any free tool you rely on. Second, you've got to design your systems to minimize critical dependencies on any single company. Third, for really essential infrastructure, your databases, your message queues, you should seriously favor a managed service. And finally, just because something has a verified publisher checkmark on Docker Hub doesn't mean it's a promise that'll be around and free forever.
Which really leaves us with this one final and pretty heavy question. The Bitnami situation is a huge wake-up call. As free and open-source software becomes the actual bedrock of our entire digital world, what happens when the business model that was supporting it all just changes overnight? It's something every single one of us in this industry needs to be thinking about, and thinking about hard.